Are you looking forward to 2018?
No.
Hello everybody and welcome to the Filipino Freethinkers podcast that's also a video. I'm Red and I'm joined today by Nicole Curato, a sociologist, a friend of the podcast. Hi Nicole, welcome back.
Hi Red.
And Happy New Year.
Yes, Happy New Year to you.
Are you looking forward to 2018?
No.
I will read something that you recently posted on Facebook. In 2017, we got closer to the gutter than the stars. It would be naive to think we have seen the worst because if there is one lesson this year has taught us, it is that bigotry, tyranny, patriarchy, and everyday forms of douchebaggery have no limits. Let's brace ourselves for 2018. If we start thinking we're out of the woods, we're in trouble. So, on a scale of 1 to get an Australian visa, like how bad how much shit are we in?
I think we have to expect the worst. I've lost all hope and optimism, which is, I think, a very important characteristic I have as a person, as an academic, as a, political commentator. But yes, I think that when we started 2018, that was such a strong message. We have to brace ourselves for the worst.
Yes, because the previous times that I talked to you, compared to the other people that I've talked to, like you've had a very measured, objective, kind of fair to everyone kind of approach. Like, let's give them the benefit of the doubt.
Yeah.
Let's assume that they're still in this for good.
Who's they?
Like everyone.
Okay.
Everyone. The people that others just dismiss as,
right.
Like even Duterte himself, right?
Yeah, absolutely.
But now you're like, brace yourselves. Like that's a meme. So yeah, what brought about this change?
Well, quite a number of things. I think where I'm coming from is that, in my professional career, my work as an ethnographer, meaning I spend a lot of time with people, ordinary people on the field. And I think the last time we talked, or a few podcasts ago, we talked about my work with Duterte supporters. And part of that work is really to understand the rationalities underpinning the support for Duterte. And I think when we really engage with these communities, it's hard not to sympathize and see the rationality, right? The frustration, the anger, and the promise that the president enlivens. The promise enlivens our hopes for democracy. So until last year, I was really, really optimistic because I thought there was space. But I think towards the end of 2017 and the beginning of 2018, I think the character of this regime really just exposed itself. That, okay, when the president had all of these promises during the campaign that sounded so violent, that sounded so authoritarian, I thought, yeah, maybe they're right. Maybe that's just how the president talks. Maybe he doesn't really mean it. But now we see actual, practical, empirical manifestations that, man, this guy's serious.
Yeah. Yes. And maybe...
So you can call me naive now. It's okay.
So I can say now, I told you so?
Well, don't blow.
No. So you were at last night's rally, demonstration.
Yes. Yeah.
Like that was on freedom of speech for the press. That censorship that the administration is doing, that SEC case against Rappler. So what was that like? Like what did you experience last night?
Well, it felt like a very, it's a tight-knit group supporting each other. I think there was even some clarification that it's not really a protest, but it's more of a rally of solidarity for Rappler and the journalists in the Philippines. So I was there with some colleagues from the sociology department in UP and some academic friends as well, because I think there's a very thin line between censorship of the media and censorship of academia. It can easily be a slippery slope. So the mood was very, in a way, sometimes solemn, but also very indignant. So it's nice to hear statements of solidarity from other journalists, photojournalists, and some artists. So it's enlivening to a certain extent. But I think this is just the beginning of many protests.
Yes.
But I think my main reflection here is when we think of successes of protests in the age of digital media, in the age of Duterte, we have to calibrate our expectations. I think it will be unfair to think that protests would look like a large number of people coming together in one venue, fighting traffic to get there. I think we have to keep an eye on more fragmented protests, but meaningful forms of expressing resistance against the regime.
Yes, all of these count, all of these add up. And speaking of resistance, you write for Rappler. You're a correspondent for them. You know these women. I mean, these people who lead Rappler. So what's the mood there like? Like when they were, the case was, I mean, the case had been filed like since last year, but the results are just only coming out now. So what is it like? What's the mood like?
Yes, I mean, of course, the people working for Rappler are admirable people. My best friend works for Rappler, and I'm just very grateful that this is a media organization that gave space to people like us to get our voices heard, to submit think pieces. It's inclusive to a certain extent. But of course, my support or my admiration for Rappler is also very qualified, because there are instances when I find something I don't like with their coverage, or when something dodgy is posted on their website, I kind of feel like, oh, really? Rappler, are you doing this? So I get the resentment that some people have against Rappler. But there's a way around it, which is to email the editor and tell them, I think this is an advertorial masking as an article. And they respond and they say, oh, sorry, that's a mistake. And they correct it. So I'm saying this to lay the context that, you know, I'm not idealizing this media organization. But having said that, you were asking about the mood of the people working for Rappler. I think they're in the same boat. They seem very indignant, but they're also bracing themselves for the worst. So we, I guess, can foresee a lot of cases filed against them. Sometimes, I mean, maybe not sometimes, but a lot of it is in the form of harassment.
Oh, yes.
Like a cybercrime case filed against Maria Ressa even before the cybercrime law was passed. Yeah. So, you know, we can expect the absurd, I think. Although I think I also have to qualify that the SEC decision is also very much subject to debate. Like some reasonable lawyers I know would have an argument against Rappler as well. If this were any other ordinary context, I think it would be a very interesting, legal, rational debate on what counts as ownership of Philippine media. Or what counts as influence or foreign influence of Philippine media. In normal circumstances, that would be a very exciting debate. But these aren't normal circumstances.
And for the administration to say it's foreign influence. And with everything that's going on with the China and Russia and all that. So I'm thinking too, like they're suggesting that Rappler should be downgraded to Blogger. Right. And then you have the communications group of this administration composed primarily of bloggers. Like they're the main people delivering the message. So it's kind of like a democratization, sort of. Like anyone can be a journalist now. Anyone can be the source of news, the opinion makers. And these people have no journalistic training. And these people at Rappler who do have journalistic training and backgrounds are being kind of, it's a leveling off. So in a way, that democratization is happening. So from someone who works at that center of deliberative democracy, like what do you think of this? Because this is one of the good things that you mentioned, like during the start of the Duterte campaign even, that it's good for democracy, that a lot of people want to participate. But there's this sense that everyone can participate in the same ways now, and there's no elite sort of barrier keeping someone from entering. What's your take on that?
I think bloggers and journalists are not competitors. They have a symbiotic relationship. I think for blogging to be meaningful, they need to have a credible source of information, which journalists can provide. You need actual people on the ground, live, bearing witness, telling us what exactly is happening. Bloggers don't necessarily do that, although of course you have the bloggers in Malacanang who witness press conferences and all that. But it has limits, whereas a legitimate media organization would actually have people on the ground, documented, passing through a rigid process of editorial controls before it makes it to the website or to the print version of a news report, right? And I think there's a difference. So I think the idea of blogging can only be meaningful in a democracy if it's based on actual information.
Yes.
Which is also a wake-up call for media, because if there's anything that this mood or moment tells us, the lack of support or legitimacy of mainstream media, I guess, is also like a pushback of the public against what they see as corrupt media practices. So there's also a time for reflection for mainstream media outlets.
So let's go back to something you said earlier. You've been talking to Duterte supporters
Yes.
more and more,
Yes.
and you've lost hope.
No!
Okay, let's not frame it that way. Let's not frame it that way, because you were telling me about some interesting people who
Right.
family members have died,
Yeah.
and yet they still are there
Right.
backing Duterte. Like,
Right.
tell us about their stories.
Right. So the ongoing research project I have is to research how families left behind, they call themselves the tokhang families. Families left behind by the drug war respond in the aftermath of the death of their loved ones. So usually it's a husband, a brother, or a breadwinner in the family. And in our interviews, of course, we ask about their views on the Duterte regime. And a lot of them would actually say that they agree with the drug war. I think all of us agree that, to a certain extent, pushers have to be caught, preferably the high-level smugglers. But so there's this kind of consensus that yes, they agree with the policy, but where they differ is, I think a lot of them would say, but the problem is with the police, not necessarily with Duterte. And I think one reality there is because these are, I work with slum communities, right? And they would experience police extortion every day before Duterte came to power. So the experience of this very tense relationship or the lack of relationship with the police predates this current president. So when their loved ones got shot because of the drug war, they don't necessarily associate that to the president, which to me is very interesting because from where I sit, I see it as marching orders from the commander-in-chief telling his police officers that it's killing season.
And emboldening them even more than before.
Yes.
Like, if you get caught doing your job of killing criminals, I will be there to save you.
Yes, precisely.
So they've divorced those to compartmentalize them somehow.
Right.
So, yeah.
But I think more can also be said about the conditions that embolden police officers to engage in this kind of act. They are also subject to the institution, right? So if you are a police officer and your police unit has targets when it comes to bodies delivered, then they really have a choice, right? But I think I would caution this by saying that the reality of the drug war is very much concentrated in Manila. Because when I do my fieldwork, let's say in Tacloban, in Cebu, lately in Iligan and Marawi, the drug war feels very distant for them. It feels like it's something that happens in Manila, and the issues they face are equally violent, except that it's less spectacular. But, hunger, starvation of farmers, rebuilding of Marawi, right? That's violence in itself. So I think when I had conversations with the students, particularly in Mindanao, and they say, the problem with people in Manila is they only think of Manila and you don't think about the conflict in Mindanao. I kind of tried to turn the tables as well. Then maybe we have a bond now. Yeah. We both experience violence. You experience violence in the South. We experience violence in Imperial Manila. Let's talk about it, right? Because now we have a shared experience. So I think that conversation can keep moving forward. So maybe I'm still hopeful. I take that back. I take my doomsday-ish scenario
back. That's a very interesting point. So there's insurgency, violence, terrorism in the South, and in Manila, you have the drug war, which, as you kind of say, is not a nationwide drug war.
Right.
The Davao Death Squad is now the Manila Death Squad, sort of. And then in the middle, you have a different kind of violence, acts of God, like the...
abandonment,
like the storms that always go through there. So different kinds of violence all throughout the country.
Right.
That's very interesting. And speaking of, that whole overall look at the country, you did a very good job, by the way. Congratulations on this book. If you don't have a copy yet, get one already. National Bookstore, fully booked, they carry it, but sometimes they're out of stock. So
Ateneo Press has stock and they deliver.
There you go.
Yeah.
Check out Ateneo Press. So you wrote this like a year or two?
I can't remember now.
In the making? I can check.
So we capped it on the 6th month of the Duterte regime because the promises in 3 to 6 months. So for the authors, that was my cutoff. I think it got published in September, and we did a world tour for a month. it was a fantastic world tour, and I think the highlight of that tour, I mean, we were in Japan, the US, of course, Philippines, and Australia. The highlight for me was the realization that people always say that the country is so polarized about Duterte. I actually don't see polarization. What I see are nuances with people's positions. So a lot of weighing is happening. Like, I like this about him, but not that, right? And I think if we keep our conversations in social media and the way conversations are curated highlights the difference, then we're really doomed. But if we actually have a decent, face-to-face, honest-to-goodness conversation about what we think and not artificially impose to other people what we think they think, I think we can have a meaningful conversation about this. So again, going back to my experience in the book launch in Mindanao State University in Iligan, a lot of the students actually said, I don't like his language, but I like the fact that he's from here. Others would say, his language is so familiar to us. That's the least that bothers us about him. What bothers us is that Lumad voices are excluded from federalism, right? Yeah. So there's a lot of nuance there. So I think when we look at polls and we see 82% trust rating, we still have to unpack that, right? Yes. Because if you talk to these people with very complex calculations and you kind of force them to say, yeah, but on balance, do you like him or you not like him? Maybe I like him.
So nuance is something that you kept mentioning through that, and I agreed about the importance of that. But that's one of the things that has really been sacrificed in this. Like, no more nuance. You don't like something about Duterte, you're Dilawan.
Yes.
You support something that Duterte has said or done, you're a Dutertard, or whatever term you have.
Right.
So how do you even navigate this, despite the difficulty of doing that in this age of social media, where people don't like nuance so much?
Right.
You know, nuance takes a lot of words.
Yes.
And you need to click the read more to see the nuance. You want very catchy headlines, and the people who are good at using those headlines and summarizing things in very catchy ways, not even true ways, like, will get millions of followers. While the people who are very nuanced will have fewer followers, I think, by the nature of social media being like that.
Yeah.
And that's what they're using as currency. Like, I've heard stories of the bloggers in Malacanang in particular who won't pay attention to you if you have fewer than, let's say, 1 million followers. Like, oh, that person is a nobody. Don't listen to this opinion because he has, 150
don't deserve to be covered by the BBC.
Yeah, like
they're minor bloggers.
Yeah, they're minor bloggers. See, like, it doesn't matter what they say anymore, how nuanced their take is.
Yes.
So how do you navigate that?
I think we just have to be faithful to the voices we hear on the ground. I mean, my career is not hinged on followers on Facebook,
likes,
and
reacts.
I'm just more than happy to have the opportunity to keep engaging with students and people who attend our conversation series. So we don't really call it a book launch for the Duterte reader. We call it a conversation series. And I think these are the spaces that we just need to keep opening up. Because I think it's very challenging if we just limit our conversations on Facebook. Facebook is tone deaf, right? I mean, thank God for emojis, but even emojis are very fluid, right? They're very slippery.
They're GIFs now.
Or GIFs, yes. But yeah, so it's good to grab attention to something for a very important cause. So I think social media is good for that. But I think if it's about nuance, then maybe that's not the best space for it. Maybe conversations like this would be a
among families even. I think that's what needs to increase. Like the no talking politics or religion at the dinner table culture that we have has to stop.
Right. Yeah, even among friends. Although, of course, I also get the point that sometimes there has to be spaces where just no politics at all.
You need to unwind and relax and maintain your sanity. Self-care is an important thing.
We started today about exchanging notes and fitness regimens for 20
Intermittent fasting.
Intermittent fasting.
Very cool.
Exactly.
So, as the editor of this book,
like,
and with the hindsight, with everything that you have learned so far, like, which pages would you like to tear out? Like, which statements here do you want to write over? Like, oops, I was wrong. Sorry about that. Or which chapters would you like to add?
Right.
So tell us about that.
I love all authors equally, but differently. That's for the record.
Okay.
No, but I think it's the last part. I wish I could have done a better job bringing the voices of people we don't normally hear. So, for example, I wish I brought in someone who does peasant studies, or indigenous studies, or someone whose expertise is about displaced communities. I am very, very aware that the lineup of the book are usual suspects. And the reason why I approach them is because these are people who've already written so much about, at that point, the campaign. And the idea is just to transform their pieces to something more reflective, kind of taking stock and expanding it to 3,000 to 5,000 words. But yes, so I think I recognize that it's a major gap in the book. But having said that, I'm pretty proud of the fact that the lineup of authors is pretty diverse. So it's almost gender equal, geographically dispersed. I even played a little bit of identity politics there, so I think it's important that the Mindanao chapter is written by young Mindanao-based scholars, that the Queering Rodrigo Duterte chapter is written by an LGBT advocate. So all these things, I think the positionality of the author really matters to surface these issues.
So you're also part of another book, not the editor, but just a writer, Manila,
Yes.
and more. Talk about that for a bit.
Right. So it's Raymond Ang's project, right? So he wanted to do a good city guide of Manila because, I don't know, I mean, the last Lonely Planet Philippines guide I read talked about Sharon Cuneta as the biggest star
update
in the Philippines.
Who's the star now? Who's the iconic star now?
It's Liza Soberano, right? Of course. We have to know this. We're sociologists. Anyway, so the book really talks about Manila in terms of districts or suburbs. So they talk about Capitolio, Makati, and whatever. So my contribution was one page about politics. And basically, the argument I make is to understand the Philippines, we don't really need to exoticize the Philippines because, the impression is you have this madman for president, you have a congressman who crossbreeds tigers and lions, or something exotic like that. Yes, yeah. Exactly. Okay, these are all very interesting, but really the history of the Philippines, if we want a flavor of the politics, is to see how much it's contested. Like, it's not all about these crazy politicians from above, but it's also the creative kinds of citizenship that we practice from below, right? So I tend to draw attention to that, and that's, I think, the key feature of our politics, that there's a lot of experimentation and exciting things going on from the ground.
I will check out that book and have you sign it the next time.
Yes, because this is, I think, my coolest collection, because Liz Wu is there, Pia Wurtzbach is there, Margarita Forrest is there, so I'm officially cool, I think.
You're officially cool.
At least for...
I've always thought you're cool, but you're official.
Not like that, yes.
Yeah, you're
it legitimized my coolness credentials.
Congratulations
Thank
on that.
you, but maybe just for 5 minutes.
That's the biggest award of your life. Like,
I think so.
Outstanding Young Man is like...
Beyond my transgender award, yes.
Yeah, you have the Manila and more award.
Yeah, it's a fantastic book. Yeah.
So you mentioned spaces, nuance. Is there time for that? Because people, like, we're being faced with censorship of Rappler. We're being faced with Cha-Cha, which is a very real thing that could, it's likely. It could happen. Yeah. And whatever else, like full-on dictatorship. A lot of people are, it would be good to have that individual interaction with people and respect them. And respect the nuance. Yeah. But that takes time. Do we have time?
No. Time's not on our side, I think. Especially if you're faced with a Congress that tries to railroad charter change. I think that's a big problem. And I think, again, the nuance we have to put forward when it comes to censorship or repression of free speech is not the outright repression. I mean, we can even debate whether Rappler is actually silenced, right? It's harassed maybe, but it can still speak out, and people can still speak out. And I think that's what a lot of Duterte supporters are actually saying. What do you mean you defend free press? You're out in the streets rallying. But I think we have to be more cautious about the insidious forms of censorship. For example, when they railroad charter change, basically what they're telling us is your voice doesn't matter. Leave it to your congressman. We don't even need to have voter education about the change of the constitution. Just go to the polls and vote for it. I think that's more subtle forms of censorship, because basically it's telling people your voices don't matter. When you have Salvador Panelo telling people that the Filipinos are illiterate, majority of the voters are illiterate, it really brings down our esteem as a nation and basically tells us, leave it to the corrupt people of Congress to decide what's best for the nation. And that's really, really bothering.
And it's even an extra slap in the face for me, because if you ram it down people's throats and, you have no choice in the matter, like, we will just kill all the criminals, implement charter change so that we can rule forever, like censor and shut down all the news outlets, request resignation letters from all the politicians.
Yes, exactly.
You know, I have complete control over them. If that happened, that's one thing, right?
Yeah.
But if it happens in this slow way and people always kind of still support it, and it's something that some people even say that they want, which is certainly happening in those pro-Duterte pages that I visit on Facebook.
Yeah.
That's an extra slap in the face. Like, people actually want dictatorship, sort of. You know? So, as you said, the time is not on our side, right? But things are not so bad yet, and everyone else who is like watching what's happening unfold is, okay, it's not yet time. It's not yet time to go out in the streets. Nope, it's not yet time. It's not yet time.
Yeah.
So that's the good thing that the administration is doing in its effort. It's not shocking people like so much. It's always very measured.
Or it desensitizes us with a shock, because every day there's something big going on, and then you're always just, oh, okay, what's going on? It's kind of hard to process what's going on. Take a step back and see, okay, which rights are being curtailed in the first week of January or something like that. Yeah, but I think what really bothers me is, okay, a lot of people know what they don't like about the Duterte regime. A lot of people know what they don't like about the Liberal Party. Where is the next opposition coming from? And I think that's our bigger problem at the moment, because if there's a huge rally against charter change, for example, organized by the Liberal Party, I'm not going. I mean, I don't like their politics either, right? So where's like the axis of organizing now? And if we just reflect on new political actors in the Philippines that doesn't come from political dynasties, they always come from celebrities, right? So you think a Manny Pacquiao figure, like in the US, right? Like it's Oprah now, that's kind of making people excited.
I think Liza Soberano should consider.
She's even 18 yet. But yeah, so
Worse back.
Possibly.
You know her for the Manila.
We have a bond now.
Yeah, Liz Uy.
Right. Yeah, but I guess what I'm saying is, some of us, I think, have to stop being elitist when it comes to, we need to build institutions, yes, but not look down on personalities, because I think that's the biggest lesson in the age of populism. Personality does matter in politics. It's not necessarily a bad thing if a leader can inspire. Right? So I think in this very moment in Philippine politics, that's the missing ingredient, I think. It's that figure that can really inspire us, which is not a surprise why people don't really react with Laila de Lima being in jail, because she's not the most endearing person that you will rally behind. Unfortunately, it's the same for Maria Ressa, right? Doesn't really enliven people. So yes, who knows what will happen next. But I think that's my main worry. There's no credible opposition, not necessarily from government, but from more mainstream society that we can all trust and rally behind.
So you heard it from Nicole, Liza Soberano 2019. Thank you for watching this podcast. Please like, share, comment, subscribe. Buy the Duterte Reader, Manila, and more. Watch Nicole's other videos of her guest. You talked about the SEC issue on CNN as well. Yes. So we'll add a link to that as well. And we will talk about this at the next meetup. Be sure to attend that one. Details of that on our website, on our social media. Thanks, Nicole.
Thank you, Red.
And on behalf of our millions of staff, see you next time.
Fake news.
Fake news.